Welcome to The Explainer. I'm your highly prepared research assistant, and today we're zeroing in on a crucial set of documents for any pastoral or lay delegate heading to the 2026 LCMS Convention in Phoenix. Specifically, we're looking at Floor Committee 9, Structure and Administration. Look, this committee handles the most comprehensive structural and governance changes brought before this entire convention. So we aren't here to guess, and we aren't here to offer opinions. We're here to trace the facts, unpack the structural impacts, and get you fully ready for the floor.
Okay, let's dive into this. Before you evaluate any single resolution, you need an analytical compass. And the absolute guide you must use is this. How does this resolution help the Synod serve congregations and mission fields? Every bylaw change, every structural tweak, actually every new entity requirement needs to be measured against this standard. You've got to ask, does it support transparent administration, accountable governance, and outward gospel mission?
Well, to answer that question, we're going to adopt a strict, mission-focused posture. Our framework is incredibly simple: kingdom over castle. The Synod serves the congregations, not the other way around, right? We're looking for structures that offer low control but high accountability. We want strong doctrine that fuels an outward witness. As a delegate, you literally have to ensure that these structural changes empower the local kingdom rather than just fortifying the synodical castle.
So here is our agenda for this briefing. Think of this as an executive summary. We're bypassing the routine housekeeping stuff today to focus strictly on the most consequential, high-impact structural overhauls. Resolution 911, Resolution 913, and Resolution 914.
Okay, Section 2, establishing the source chain and our rigorous fact-checking methodology. As your research assistant, my first responsibility is factual accuracy. We don't guess, and we definitely don't infer relationships unless the documents clearly support them.
Check out this verification table. Before we analyze anything, we trace the exact source chain from the official convention publication, Today's Business, straight through to the overtures. Notice that we verified the source locations for our three major resolutions today, and all three carry a high factual risk note. Why? Because they fundamentally alter governance, representation, or constitutional structures. Massive structural overhauls demand rigorous structural proof, for sure. Let's see how this builds our understanding of the first major change.
Moving into Section 3, Resolution 911, the Corporate Entities Overhaul. The most consequential restructuring proposal. Make no mistake, this is the largest proposal coming out of Committee 9, and it's absolutely expected to generate some significant debate on the convention floor. Basically, here is the plain language summary of what 911 actually accomplishes. It comprehensively rewrites bylaw section 1.5 to create a unified framework for establishing, acquiring, and overseeing corporate subsidiaries. It completely revises the definitions of an agency and property of the Synod, and it introduces entirely new categories like managed subagencies, special purpose entities, and passive investment entities.
We've verified this spans pages 160 to 172 in today's Business Issue 1. Now, the administrative problem this tries to solve is very real. I mean, nothing says church bureaucracy quite like a tangled web of subsidiaries, right? For decades, the Synod has relied on what the documents call piecemeal guidelines and opinions from the Commission on Constitutional Matters. Right now, there's just a distinct lack of a unified rules set for how corporate entities are formed and overseen as the Synod has grown increasingly complex.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark contrast between the stated rationale and the binding actions. The whereas rationale focuses heavily on unification and cleaning up outdated provisions. But look at the resolved actions. While it mandates transparency and conflict of interest policies, which is great, it also heavily empowers the board of directors, giving them broad authority to even waive certain bylaw requirements. It's a massive shift in how entities are governed.
And honestly, we can't ignore the financial reality of this compliance. The Board of Directors estimates an annual cost of $200,000 just to add a governance and compliance position to manage these new rigorous processes. That is a very real, very tangible administrative cost to this restructuring.
So what does this all mean for authority flow? Does this push authority upward to the castle or outward to the kingdom? Well, based on the documents, while this resolution significantly increases transparency, the authority flow moves decidedly upward. It heavily centralizes corporate control and oversight within the board of directors. For you delegates, the key question is whether these new requirements might be too burdensome for smaller agencies and districts.
All right, Section 4, Resolution 913, Electoral Circuit Updates. Changing delegate allocation parameters. This one directly impacts you and exactly how your representation is allocated.
The plain language summary here is that it amends bylaw 3.1.2 based on a 2023 task force. It changes the basis for circuit formation from individual congregations to parishes to better reflect the reality of multi-congregation parishes. But here is the kicker. It removes the possibility of exceptions to circuit requirements, and it completely removes the upper limits on the size of an electoral circuit. The whole shebang.
We verified this on pages 174 and 175 of today's business. The problem it's addressing is demographic. The task force surveyed pastors and district presidents and realized that shifting demographics mean the old representation standards just don't fit the current reality of the church's geography and parish structures anymore.
So the crucial point is the tension between the rationale and the mandate. The rationale is to strengthen circuits and encourage pastoral collaboration. However, the action establishes a strict mandate, a minimum of 6 parishes and 1,500 members. Absolutely no exceptions are permitted other than the rule that each district must have at least one circuit. By removing the upper limits, circuits could theoretically become quite large.
The authority flow here is definitely mixed. On one hand, it requires upward, castle-level administrative reorganization by district boards to meet these strict new standards. But on the other hand, it pushes outward by encouraging greater pastoral collaboration locally among those parishes. But here's the delegate question you've got to consider. How will sparsely populated rural areas possibly meet a strict minimum of 6 parishes and 1,500 members without any exceptions?
Okay, moving on to Section 5, Resolution 9-14, Special Conventions, a major constitutional amendment. Because, this is not just a bylaw change, it's a constitutional amendment, touching deeply on the balance of power between district presidents and congregational representation.
In plain language, this amends Constitution Article 12:15. Currently, a special district convention generally needs the district president's consent. This amendment provides alternative mechanisms to call one without that consent.
Verified on pages 175 and 176, the core problem here is an accountability gap. If a district president is unable to call a special convention, or perhaps, quote, unwilling to do so during an extraordinary situation, the congregations and circuits currently have 0 mechanisms to convene one themselves.
And this brilliantly illustrates the tension between due process and specific mechanics. While the rationale is all about enhancing accountability and due process, the resolved action specifically allows circuit forums, representing 3/4 of the circuits, or a majority of district vice presidents to make the call. It also mandates a 30-day notice to congregations.
So how does the authority flow? Well, because this is a constitutional change, it requires a 2/3 convention vote and then ratification by 2/3 of voting congregations. Ultimately, this pushes authority downward and outward. It grants local circuits and congregations a much greater voice in extraordinary situations. The question for delegates is to weigh that local empowerment against the possibility of potential administrative risks associated with calling extraordinary conventions.
That brings us to Section 6, Kingdom over Castle, our final review and clearing the docket. We've looked at the massive corporate overhaul, the strict new electoral circuit math, and a major constitutional amendment regarding special conventions.
I also want to quickly point out this resolution right here. Our methodology confirms this is a standard declination action. It respectfully declines a long list of overtures that either didn't follow bylaw procedures or are just redundant. It effectively clears the docket, allowing you to focus your energy on the high-impact items we've discussed today.
As a delegate, you're going to be flooded with information, reports, and debate. Apply this rigorous framework to everything. Strip away the rhetoric, look at the plain language, check the source chain, and always ask this final question. Does this structure serve the mission field, or does it draw power upward? Keep that metric in mind for every single vote you cast in Phoenix. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.